Hey there, welcome back. All right, so we're going to do another author interview. We just got done talking with Mark Graban here about his previous book, Lean Hospital. So Mark, welcome back.
Thanks.
Even though we didn't really move.
Good to see you again.
Yeah. So what we're going to do in this video is talk about your second book, Healthcare Kaizen, which we have electronically here on the iPad. So I guess the first question, Mark, is when did you write it?
Yeah, so Joe Schwartz is my co-author. Joe and I partnered up on this book. The book was released in late 2012, and so we were working on it, for a year up before that point. But Joe and I had gotten introduced by Norman Bodek, who Norman has written many books about Kaizen and Lean and the Toyota production system. We had that shared background, and we got introduced when Joe and I first got into healthcare in 2005, and we ran into each other at some conferences. And Joe had spent at that point about 7 years at the Franciscan St. Francis Health System in Indianapolis, really helping deeply drive a culture of continuous improvement. As a consultant, I flutter around and work with lots of different organizations that were getting started with Kaizen. And so it was kind of a natural blending of our experiences to put a book together. So it was great working with Joe on that.
Yeah. So kind of following on from Lean Hospitals, where does Healthcare Kaizen kind of pick up? Maybe another way to frame that is, if someone is kind of new to the Lean journey and a healthcare perspective, would you recommend Lean Hospitals first and then this book, or does it not matter?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say maybe it depends on the circumstances that the reader's in. So one reason we wrote the book is that we see a lot of organizations out there over the last 10 years or so focusing on Lean, primarily as a series of week-long Kaizen events or rapid improvement events. And so, the one thing that is still an opportunity is creating that culture of daily continuous improvement. It's what Norm Bodek and Masaki Imai from Kaizen Institute really emphasize is that Kaizen events have a place, but what's really powerful is creating that workplace culture where everyone is identifying problems and solving things every day. So there's a lot of people out there who are layering this daily continuous improvement on top of what they've already been doing with Lean. And Theta Care, I think, was an example of that, where they started with a lot of events and had a lot of great success. And then their focus shifted to more of the culture and the management system. But at the same time, we often recommend Healthcare Kaizen to organizations that are looking for kind of, a small baby steps approach to getting started. We want to engage people in identifying problems, testing solutions, and that's a great way to try to get the ball rolling to then maybe move into more formal Lean activities. That's been more the story at Franciscan St. Francis, where they started with daily Kaizen, and then they started doing some of the other Lean practices on top of that. But Kaizen, going back to Toyota, is really one of the core pieces of Lean and the Toyota production system.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I did skip was there's tons of positive blurbs here about this book inside.
Nobody ever includes the negative blurbs.
I guess. Yeah, this stinks, No, but here's a really nice one from Gary Kaplan, who is the chairman and CEO at Virginia Mason Medical Center. He said, in Healthcare Kaizen, Mark Graban and Joseph Schwartz show us that Kaizen is more than a set of tools. What we have learned through our application of the Virginia Mason production system is that Kaizen is a management methodology of continuous improvement that must permeate the fabric of the entire organization. Frontline staff must know, understand, embrace, and drive Kaizen and its tools to achieve incremental and continuous improvements. This book will help healthcare organizations around the world begin and advance their journey. So some really nice words, and again, there's tons of other nice blurbs here. John Toussaint gave you another nice word there, like he did in Lean Hospital. So now this book, the table of contents is pretty detailed, and so what we're going to do is you've broke this book up into 3 main sections. So let's just kind of go through each of those sections, and then you can kind of point in some of the particular chapters if you want to. But the first section is, what is Kaizen? So what did you write about in that section?
Yeah, so in those first chapters, we're laying out some of the introductions to just what does the word Kaizen mean. Joe and I debated quite a bit whether we wanted to sort of heavily use the word Kaizen, or did we want to Americanize it and call it continuous improvement. The word Kaizen really just means good change or
Yeah.
improvement, usually used in the context of continuous improvement. We obviously decided to use the word Kaizen
Yeah.
because as we define Kaizen and talk about some of the history of it outside of healthcare and in healthcare, I think it's important to distinguish, for example, how Kaizen is different than suggestion box systems. Most hospitals at some point have had a suggestion box hanging on the wall, or they might have a software-based suggestion box. Suggestion boxes don't work. And it's hard to ever find anybody that will really stand up and defend. So, well, no, actually, our suggestion box worked great. People kind of shake their heads. And there's that recognition that suggestion boxes didn't work.
And they said worked. Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Worked, like past tense.
Or it never worked at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, Kaizen is very different than suggestion boxes, where if you have an idea, you don't shove it in a box.
Why are they always locked?
To be hidden. No, I was joking. It's not because people are coming in and stealing your ideas.
No, I know.
That you need to keep them under lock and key. But suggestion boxes are slow and batchy. They're not transparent. Usually some committee just votes yes or no on the ideas. And so we point out the problems in suggestion boxes to help highlight how Kaizen is different. It's a much more collaborative, ongoing process where we're not just throwing out suggestions, but we're also identifying problems. And we're marrying up a problem and an idea, and we're going and testing that in what we call PDSA, plan, do, study, adjust. And so those are some of the basics and the underlying principles and philosophies that we cover in the first half of the book, and to share some of the examples from Joe's organization about what the benefits have been.
Why don't you share, can you think of one example just off the top of your head that you wrote about that might be interesting for folks?
Yeah, there's over 100 examples in the book that we've published, the way we document things in the Kaizen process. There's examples, one that's in chapter 1, and this is from Joe's organization. It's just a great example of something that's really patient-focused. Was the example of Hope, who was an ultrasound technologist who identified a problem that little kids really get freaked out by the ultrasound process. There's gel, and they're either getting their abdomen pressed on by a paddle, and they freak out, and they kind of get upset and cry. And so, very caring, patient-centered way. She wasn't saying, "Oh, that's screwing up my efficiency." But saying, well, the kids get upset, and that creates a bad environment for everybody, and it causes delays. But a lot of organizations would focus on a big, expensive solution. Let's put a movie system up in the ceiling, and we could write a grant and spend a lot of money to solve that problem. Well, in Kaizen, we're taught to focus on simple, testable, easy to implement, low-cost ideas. So Hope had been at a wedding one weekend and had one of these little bottles of soap bubbles. We don't throw rice anymore, we blow bubbles, right? And so she thought, well, there's an interesting idea there. So in the Kaizen process, we emphasize it's not about people just randomly and wildly trying stuff. She didn't literally pull that bottle from the wedding out and start blowing soap and spit on the kids. There's a discussion that takes place to get the right people involved, to talk to infection control, to talk to parents, to get their input, to figure out, okay, if we're going to have to buy little bottles of soap, how do we make that happen? But in a relatively short period of time, they had something that they could test, and they found that it worked in a very kind of inexpensive, fun way. And when we talked in the book about lean hospitals, they have a standardized process now with these soap bubbles, but they always ask the parents, and they ask the parent, do you think this would be a good idea for your child? Sure. So they don't force that on people.
No, standard work says we
have
bubbles.
to use the bubbles. And it's just, I just love that example because it's caring, and it illustrates how good Kaizen can be good for the patients and the family, for the staff, and for the hospital itself, because preventing delays is going to improve care and maybe increase throughput through the department, which has a financial impact as well.
What's interesting about that is, a course that we're actually working on right now at Gimba Academy is really the people side of lean, because in the end, it's really all about people.
What else is
right?
there?
That's it. And there's this respect for people that we talk about is actually, John Miller, as you know, John speaks Japanese, and said the original phrasing with Toyota was actually, it's better translated as respect for humanity.
Right.
And that's what that is. That's what Hope just did. It's about that little child.
Yeah,
you know?
and Kaizen, I think, respects people's humanity in the
Yeah.
sense that people do want to participate. They do want their voices to be heard. They do want to make things better for patients. And one of the things we write about in the book is this phrase of people being resistant to change. And I think that gets sometimes just, I think, irresponsibly thrown out. We're blaming people who disagree with the change. And a lot of times they're disagreeing because it's a change that's not really better, or they're quote unquote resisting because they weren't involved and engaged in the process. And so, Kaizen is not about the manager having an idea and then getting people to go along with it. It's helping people identify problems, help them brainstorm and test solutions, and the manager plays a role of more of a coach instead of being judge. And it's a much more collaborative process.
Excellent.
I think it's very respectful.
Yeah. Okay, so section 2 then is about Kaizen methodologies. So what did you guys get into in those chapters?
Yeah, so in those chapters we start sharing more of the how-to mechanics of saying, okay, well, if we've come to agreement that we want a culture of continuous improvement and we want everybody to be involved, okay, so now what? You've said suggestion boxes are bad, now what? So we share a number of different methods, one of which I learned originally from David Mann in his book, Creating a Lean Culture, of something called a visual idea board, of just having a board that the team can see. And I think, in my practice with hospitals, sort of went from using a blank Post-it note to using a bit of a structured card. I found is very helpful, of getting people to ideally write down, what's the problem that we see? Do we have an idea about what to do about it? What do we think the impact of that improvement would be? Who else do we need to get input from? These are kind of key things, and you're prompting people to try to follow a good PDSA process of plan, do, study, adjust. And to put these cards on the board and to do a daily team huddle really helps with communication and collaboration. If you were to identify a problem, but you don't know what the answer or the idea or a countermeasure would be, we still encourage you to write down the problem, bring it to the team, and then somebody else in the team might come up with a solution. And so we're using the structure of cards and boards, or in some cases software. But the idea is make things very visible. Let everybody see. We're not keeping things locked away. Decision making is not limited to just a handful of people or a committee. We're letting people see what's happening. They're seeing the prioritization and the progress. And we're making that visible either through boards or sometimes, again, through computer screens. Can help make things visible if you have a team that's in lots of different locations. But make it visible, respond quickly, not months later like a suggestion box. And then, as we teach people, we kind of lay out a 5-step process. And a lot of this was Joe's development. First you find ideas, then you discuss them within the team. So again, thinking of Hope, she didn't just jump to implement something. You discuss it, not to be bureaucratic, but to get input and to test the ideas. Then implement, and part of me says we should have really used the word test. Find, discuss, test, and then document and share those improvements. So we have a chapter that talks about how to document Kaizen improvements. To do just a simple single page before and after allows us to spread and share good ideas, to give recognition to people, to reflect upon our learning. And I think especially in healthcare, when you have, let's say, a health system with 10 sites, if somebody in pharmacy A has identified and solved the problem, it's pretty likely a number of those other pharmacies are going to have that same problem. And they might not copy the exact solution. They might build upon it. They might continue in ongoing PDSA, not reinvent the wheel, not be in isolation, but to help share those ideas is very powerful.
And that's sure not just a healthcare issue. I mean, think about just back in my manufacturing days, I worked at a large company with sites all over the world, and one place in Dallas, Texas would make an improvement, and then in Europe, they had the exact same problem, and then they battle it for 6 months. For some reason, we don't share best practices as well as we should.
And I think, in the lean approach or Kaizen, or I think of an example that the people from ThedaCare, the health system in Wisconsin, have shared. They view their process of rollout as really being continued testing and refinement of the idea. So I think a lot of organizations say, okay, well, we solved it here. Now we're going to roll it out
Right.
And people sometimes feel rolled over.
Yeah.
So, you're just forcing me to implement what they did, and it might not be appropriate, or we might come up with a better way. So I think ThedaCare does a great job of articulating that what they call their alpha site maybe solves something.
Sure.
And then they share that with the beta site that can adopt it and or adapt it and make it better, and share those learnings back with the alpha site.
Yeah.
That's a deeper level of collaboration and continuous improvement compared to I fixed it, you all go do it. Which of those is more engaging? Which of those is more respectful?
I'm so smart, you should do what I did.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think sometimes people say it sounds faster to force a best practice on everybody, but if it doesn't really ever take hold and it can't be sustained, it might have been a shortcut that sounds good, as opposed to going through that process of gaining buy-in, allowing people to choose to implement something else that somebody did. Might be a little bit slower, but it works better, and it's more sustainable.
Yeah. Okay. So then section 3 is lessons learned. What did you guys write about there?
Yeah, so throughout the book we talk about the role of leaders and the culture of how to get people engaged, how to get started, how to build this culture. But in this section we share some particular examples talking about the role of senior leaders, the role of frontline leaders, what can you do, what should you do, in some cases what should you not do, to not stifle people's participation. We share some of the lessons, especially from Joe's organization, about how to spread Kaizen across multiple sites, thousands of people, hundreds of departments, and make that more of a self-sustained leadership function. And they do have a bit of a central group that they call the Kaizen Promotion Office that helps teach and coach and mentor people, but Kaizen is really owned by the leaders in different areas and different sites. And then one of the other fun things we decided to include in the book was a chapter about doing Kaizen at home. And a lot of this was inspired by Joe's organization, where they very specifically encourage people, when they learn about Kaizen, if they so find themselves doing Kaizen at home, to go through that same process and document it and write it up and share it with people at work. And whether it's improvements about how to make sure the family gets ready and all out of the house at the right time. I'm sure you could appreciate the challenges with this. And just little improvements that make your life easier. And that emphasizes, that Kaizen, it's not about goals and targets of saying everybody must do 5 Kaizens this year. It's got to be a more organic process where you're identifying and choosing to do things that make the workplace less frustrating, make things better for patients or customers. It's got to be sort of an organic process. When you see people choosing to do it at home, it really kind of just illustrates that. So we shared examples from a lot of Joe's colleagues, a couple of Kaizens that I've done at home in my own office because it was helpful to me. And so we tried to close with that just to illustrate. I think this happens with other lean principles. When you get excited about this and it's helpful, it tends to not just be a workplace thing, but it changes the way you think. You find a problem, you feel yourself just drawn to trying to fix it. And I think that's what Kaizen is about.
Absolutely, yeah. In our Kaizen Way course, the first video was my daughter's doing some Kaizen on a dishwasher. And we've had companies from all over the world talk about my daughters, and how they improved the dishwasher. It was obviously kind of, we fixed it up, but it's a powerful story and lesson that this really does apply to any aspect of your life. Right? So
I think it applies in any industry, and we see what's happening in a lot of healthcare organizations right now. That's very exciting.
All right. So now I believe this book has won some awards. Is that right?
It's also been a recipient of the Shingo Research Award, like Lean Hospital. So Joe and I were able to share that recognition earlier this year, which we were quite excited about. And then we actually, let me tell you real quickly, we did write a version of the book called The Executive Guide.
Because nobody's going to read the big. Is that right?
Well, no, we got customer feedback, and that right or wrong, our publisher let us produce a 400-page book with lots of examples and color pictures, and the book is 4.5 pounds. And we had people say,
so we have it on iPad.
Quite directly. Well, having it on iPad or Kindle helps. But we had people tell us quite directly, we want our executives to get introduced to this, and that book is too heavy for them to carry around on a plane.
Wow, interesting.
And so we wrote this version that's it's shorter. It's a lighter, less expensive book without all the full color pictures, but really emphasizes the culture, the role of leaders, a little bit about the detail of how it's done. But really, it's more of an introduction where Healthcare Kaizen, it's almost more like the Toyota Way field book. Where it's more detailed and a little bit different level of detail. So I think what we see happening is that the executive guide is being read by leaders at different levels, not just C-level, but VPs and directors. And then the Healthcare Kaizen book is really helpful to the continuous improvement functions and practitioners and managers. And they have a few of those copies that they pass around, look at the examples, and that's inspiring, and that helps. And for the executives, they have the executive guide. So there's a lot of overlap between the two books, but just written for different reader, a different audience, and in a little bit different way. But that was the voice of the customer. Maybe we should have written the executive guide first.
Yeah. Easier to take away than to add, though. Probably, right?
But that's why there's those two books that are out there and both available.
So what's the next book for Mark Graban? You got any in mind, or
can't
really say
right
now?
That's something I do think about a lot. There's the world has changed in terms of options for writing a book in different ways. And so one book I'm going to be working on with Mike Steckline, who's on the staff of the Theta Care Center for Healthcare Value, is a book we did a webinar about using SPC and control charts for making management decisions. We're going to write a book about that for healthcare.
Okay.
We both, Mike actually worked directly with Dr. Deming.
Oh, nice.
And who's obviously a big influence around all this. So we're going to write that. We're probably going to self-publish it as an ebook because it might not have a huge audience, but we want to write it. And with self-publishing options, we can do that. Because it's an important topic, and it's something that we sort of want to write and sort of try to help push and go out there. I'm also throwing around different ideas of trying to write something that might be traditionally published that's maybe more of a business book than being a quote-unquote lean book. Or, trying to write a book around some of these core lean themes, in particular the theme of not jumping the blame individuals, but looking at systems and processes. So
you didn't write a novel, man, Michael Ballet style, man.
I don't read novels, whether they're business novels or otherwise, and so I'm probably not going to write one. But I'm playing around with the idea of writing a book that doesn't hit people over the head with lean this or lean that. But there are so many different methodologies out there, including lean, that help people focus less on trying to blame bad apples and more on improving the process, whether it's in aviation safety or patient safety or other movements. So I'm toying around with the idea of writing something like that. So maybe that's a bit of a scoop for people watching today.
Well, keep up the good work, my friend.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for talking about the books today.
All right.